Hello students, today the agenda is to check our homework. We're going to be factoring polynomials and you're going to be working on page 10.2. Students will be able to factor polynomials by using the GCF or greatest common factor. So I'm going to start by going over one problem that you did yesterday or similar to what we did yesterday. Yesterday we were doing what is simplifying, which we use distributive property and combine like terms if necessary. So in here we are multiplying the 2 times the 3x will be 6x. The 2 times the 5 is 10. So these are called factors. This is one factor, this is a second factor. When we multiply them, we get a product. Now, today what we're going to be getting is the polynomial or the product, and we're going to find the two factors. That's why it's called factoring polynomials. Okay, factoring polynomials. So if we were given this, we are going to look for the greatest number that can go both into 6 and 10. What goes into 6 and 10 and is the greatest number possible? It would be 2. And to find the second factor, what we're going to do is each term we're going to divide by that greatest common factor. So 6x divided by 2 is 3x, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. Okay, so those will be my two factors, which if you notice is what I started with. So this is just to relate it to what we were seeing yesterday, but now let's do some other examples. If I have 5x squared plus 10x, we say, what goes into both 5 and 10? Some people will say 1. Yeah, 1. Also 5. Okay, and out of those two, which one is greater? It's the 5, so that's part of my greatest common factor. If all the terms have a variable, then we're going to use the one with the smallest exponent, and that's going to be part of my greatest common factor. In this case, x squared and x to the first power, we're going to use that x to the first power. Okay, this is my GCF, my greatest common factor. And so we open our parentheses and start dividing. 5 divided by 5 is 1. That we don't need to put it. Later on we'll find out because we have a coefficient 1 and we don't need it. And x to the second power divided by x. In division, what we're going to do is to subtract the exponents. We keep the same base, in this case x, and we subtract the exponents. So 2 minus 1 is 1. That's another one that we don't put. We don't put the coefficient 1 and we don't put the exponent 1. For the second one, we have 10x divided by 5x. Again, 10 divided by 5 is 2. And x divided by x is just like if we cancel it. Okay, so we just leave it as x plus 2. So my two factors are going to be 5x times, the second factor is x plus 2. Okay, let's do another example. And so we have 9x plus 12. What number goes into both 9 and 12? Well, it's 3. That's my greatest common factor. This one has x and this one doesn't, so I'm not going to include x in here because we have one of the terms with no variable. So I'm not going to put a variable in the GCF. So I start dividing. 9x divided by 3, we say that is 3x. Positive 12 divided by positive 3, the answer is positive 4. So those are going to be my two factors. Again, first we find the greatest common factor, and then we start dividing each term by that greatest common factor. Again, remember, if there is no variable in one of the terms, then we don't use a variable on the greatest common factor. Okay, let's do another example in here. The first thing we see is what is the greater number that can go into all three, which is 6, the 3, and the 9. Well, we can see that 3 goes into all of them, and that's the biggest number that can go into all of them. We also notice, oh sorry, I'm missing a square in here. We also notice that all the terms have x, so I'm gonna write x in here, and I look at the smallest degree, meaning the smallest exponent, and I notice that this is the smallest. When there is nothing in there, that means that there is a 1 in there. Okay, and then I start dividing. Remember that in division, when we have the same base, what we do is keep the base and subtract exponents, and also recall that exponent, or when there is no exponent, there is a 1 in there. So we start 6 divided by 3 is 2. X cubed divided by x, we keep the base and subtract the exponents. So 3 minus 1 is 2. Again, positive divided by positive is positive. 3 divided by 3 is 1, which we don't need to put because we have variables. And then x squared divided by x, we keep the base and subtract the exponents. 2 minus 1 is 1. That also it's not written in there, okay? 9 divided by 3, oh, and both are positive, so plus. 9 divided by 3 is 3, and then x divided by x, it cancels, so it's just 3. Okay, a couple more examples. In this case, we don't have any numbers. All we have is variables, and both terms have variables. So we're gonna get the one with the smallest exponent. That's my greatest common factor. And then I start dividing. Remember that in division, if we have the same base, we keep the base and subtract the exponents. So x to the 10th divided by x to the 9th, we keep the base and subtract 10 minus 9 is 1. We don't need to put it. And then positive divided by positive is positive. And then x to the 9th divided by x to the 9th. Anytime that you're dividing the same numerator and the same denominator, the answer is gonna be 1. Okay? In some cases, we don't need to put it because there is something else next to it. But in this case, there is nothing else, so we need to put the 1. Okay, I don't think I can fit that in here anymore, so let me use a different paper for the next example. So we have negative 2x squared minus 2x plus 4. And so I look, what goes into all negative 2, and 4? Well, it's 2. And also in the future, we're gonna need, in some instances where we need a positive x squared term. So we're gonna get rid of that negative by we know that the greatest common factor is a 2, but just to get rid of that negative in here, we're gonna put also negative on the greatest common factor. We look to see if all the terms have x. No, this one doesn't have an x, so that's it for the greatest common factor. And I'm gonna start dividing. So negative 2 divided by negative 2 is 1. And then x squared, we don't divide with anything else, we just bring it down. Again, if we have a 1 as a coefficient, we don't need to put it. We just put x squared. Negative 2 divided by negative 2 is also 1, positive 1, so we're going to put plus 1. Again, we would put a 1 in here, but then we have this x. That since we don't have anything in here, we just bring down the x. And then positive 4 divided by negative 2, that makes it negative 2. And there are no variables, so we just leave it like that. Okay, so those are my two factors. Negative 2 is one of my factors. The other factor is x squared plus x minus 2. Now, what if I have negative x plus 9? Well, there is the greatest common factor for the numbers is a 1. And this one has a variable, but this one doesn't. So I'm just going to put, just to get rid of that negative, I'm going to put negative 1 as my first factor. And I start negative x divided by negative 1, x. Positive 9 divided by negative 1, negative 9. And that's it. So I hope this is helpful, and do 10.2.